नमस्कार। राम राम सभी भाई बहनों को राम राम। जय श्री राम। ओम श्री मातरे नमः। ओम श्री मातरे नमः। Total renunciation of prohibited acts. Total renunciation of prohibited acts. This consists in wholly abstaining in thought, word and deed from wild deeds prohibited by the scriptures, such as thieving, adultery, lying, duplicity, chicanery, caution, violence, taking forbidden food, indulgence in frivolities, etc. This is the first stage of renunciation. Renunciation of actions motivated by desires. This means ceasing to perform with a selfish motive sacrifices, charity, penance, worship and other actions motivated by desire, which are generally performed with a view to obtaining agreeable objects such as wife, progeny and wealth, etc., or with the object of securing freedom from some ailment or ridding oneself of other calamities. This is the second stage of renunciation. If by the chance one is confronted with a duty, secular or sacred, which is outwardly motivated by desire, but the omission of which is calculated to cause pain to anyone or interferes with the time-honored institutions of action and worship, there is no objection to one's performing it disinterestedly and only for the good of the world. Thereby he will not be deemed to have performed an act motivated by desires. Complete renunciation of thirst for worldly objects. This consists in giving in giving up the thirst for enhancing one's honor, fame, social prestige, and the number of one's wives, progeny, and whatever other objects of a transient nature have fallen to one's lot, regarding them as an obstacle to God realization. This is the third stage of renunciation. Renunciation of the practice of taking service from others with a selfish motive. Asking for money or bodily service from another for one's own gratification and accepting articles or bodily service offered without one's asking for the same and asking to attain one's selfish and through anyone by any means whatsoever. All this is included in taking service from another with a selfish motive. Renunciation of all this is the fourth stage of renunciation. If non-acceptance of physical service from another or of refreshments etc. offered by another, where one is entitled to receive such service or offer, causes any pain to anyone or in any way hinders the maintenance of the word order, accepting service on such an occasion in an unselfish spirit and only for the pleasure of those offering it would not be blameworthy, for non-acceptance of service offered by one's own life, for non-acceptance of service offered by any, offered by one's own wife, son or servant, or of refreshments etc., offered by friends and relatives etc., is likely to cause them pain and may prove harmful. So far as propriety of social conduct is concerned, absolute renunciation of sloth and the desire for fruit in respect of all one's duties. Devotion to God, worship of God, service to one's parents and other elders, performance of sacrifices, charity and penance, earning one's livelihood appropriate to one's grade in society and stage in life, and bodily functions such as taking of food and drink and so on. All these constitute one's duty. Giving up sloth and every form of desire in respect of these is the fifth stage of renunciation. Total renunciation of sense of meum and attachment with regard to all worldly objects and activities. All worldly objects like wealth, house, clothes, etc. All near and dear ones like wife, children, friends, etc. and all forms of enjoyment of this world and the next life, honor, fame, prestige, etc. are momentary and perishable and should be regarded as impermanent, and there should be no sense of meum and attachment with regard to them, Similarly, having developed exclusive and unadulterated love for God alone, one should cease to entertain all sense of human attachment with regard to actions performed through the mind, speech and body, and even with respect to the body itself. This is the sixth type of renunciation. Men who have reached this sixth stage of renunciation develop this passion for all objects of the world, and God, who is the supreme embodiment of love, becomes the only object of their attachment. Therefore, hearing and telling and mentally dwelling on the stories of spotless divine love, which reveal his virtues, glory and mystery, and practicing constant adoration and meditation and pondering the hidden meaning of the scriptures while living in a dual place are their only favorite pursuits. They do not like to live in the midst of sensual men or to waste even a moment of their valuable time in mirth, luxury, carelessness, vilification, vilification of others, sensuous enjoyments and idle talk, etc. And they perform all their duties in a disinterested way only for God's sake, dwelling all the time on His name and form. These are six stages of renunciation, constitute the practice of Karma Yoga. To the continued practice of this discipline, the sadhaka realizes the truth about God by His grace and thereby attains the imperishable supreme states. Should, however, anyone seek to realize God through Sankhya Yoga or the path of knowledge, he should, after practicing the above six forms of renunciation, treat the path of knowledge on the lines of the complete renunciation of latent desire and self-identification with regard to the words, one's own body and all actions. Being products of Maya, all objects of the world are wholly transient, and God alone, who is truth, consciousness and bliss solidified, is equally present everywhere. With this conviction, one should erase from one's mind all thoughts of worldly objects, including the body and every form of activity, even in the form of impression, and completely renouncing self-identification with the body, one should totally disclaim lordship with regard to all actions performed by the mind, speech and body, and get firmly and constantly established in identity with God. This is the seventh stage of renunciation. Through such practice, the sadhaka easily and immediately succeeds in realizing God. But the striver who adopts the practice for Sankhya Yoga from the very beginning without going through the discipline of Karma Yoga, as outlined in the foregoing paragraphs, attains God with difficulty. Here the question arises, is it possible for a striver to practice both the discipline simultaneously? If not, why not? Our reply to this question is that the two disciplines of Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga cannot be followed by the same striver at one and the same time. For during the process of this sadhana, for during the process of his sadhana, the Karma Yoga recognizes action. The fruit of action, God and his own self as distinct entities, and renouncing the fruit of action and attachment, performs all his duties for the sake of God. The Sankhya Yoga, on the other hand, disclaims the lordship with regard to all actions performed by his mind, senses and body, regarding them as nothing but the moving of the gunas, which are the products of Maya among themselves or that of the senses, among their objects, and remain established in identity with the all-pervading divinity who is truth, consciousness, and bliss solidified. The Karma Yogi regards himself as the doer of action. The Sankhya Yoga does not. The Karma Yogi offers his actions to God. The Sankhya Yogi does not recognize actions performed by the mind and senses without any sense of lordship as action at all. The Karma Yogi views God as apart from him. The Sankhya Yogi looks on him as ever identical with him. The Karma Yogi recognizes the existence of Prakriti and all objects evolved from Prakriti. The Sankhya Yogi refuses to recognize the existence of anything other than Brahma. The Karma Yogi recognizes the existence of karma and its fruit. The Sankhya Yogi, on the other hand, neither recognizes the existence of any action or its fruit as apart from Brahma, nor claims to have any connection with such action. Thus, the process of sadhana as well as the views of two types of strivers are poles asunder. Under this circumstance, it is not possible for the same individual to follow the two disciplines at one and the same time. Just as person intending to travel from India to New York in America would reach America if he continues to travel along the correct route, either purely eastward or purely westward. Even so, though the disciplines of Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga proceed on altogether different lines, a sadhaka who resolutely pursues either will speedily reach the supreme common goal of both. Qualification for the two paths. The question now remains who are qualified for the practice of Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga as taught by the Geeta. Are they open to all, irrespective of class, creed or nationality, or only persons belonging to a particular varna or grade in society, a particular ashrama or stage in life, and a particular community are eligible for their practice? Our reply to this question is that although the method of spiritual discipline as enunciated by the Gita is wholly Indian in character and has been followed by the Arsish and seers of Vedic mantras, Nevertheless, on the careful reflection on the teachings of the Gita, it can be safely asserted that the spiritual disciplines taught in the Gita can be practiced by all human beings. This gospel of Bhagavan Krishna, the teacher of the whole world that he is intended for all mankind and not for any particular class or order. This constitutes a distinctive feature of the Gita. The Lord has made this point abundantly clear in the course of his teachings by using words like Manava, a human being, Nara, Nar, a man, Dehabharat, an embodied soul, Delhi, Dehi, one possessed of a body, etc. at several places. While enunciating the fundamental practice of Sankhya Yoga, the Lord throws it open to all humanity by using the word Dehi in that context. Similarly, the Lord declares in unequivocal terms that any human being can attain perfection by worshipping the all-pervading divinity through the performance of duties allotted to him by the scriptures. Even so, with regard to devotion, the Lord declares women, the Sudras, women of members of the laboring class, and even those of wild birth as qualified to practice it. And wherever else the word teaches any particular discipline, it never restricts its practice to men belonging to a particular varna, ashrama or community alone. Nevertheless, it should be remembered that all actions are not suited to all individuals. That is why the Lord lays great emphasis on varna, dharma, or the division of duties according to different varnas or castes. Only those actions that have been prescribed for a particular varna or grade in society constitute the duty of that varna and not those prescribed for any other varna. It is by this principle that one's action should be governed. Every man can perform duties allotted to him by such varna dharma or the code of conduct prescribed for the different varnas or castes according to his qualifications and taste. Apart from the duties prescribed for one varna or grade in society, duties prescribed for the whole of humanity such as right conduct and devotion etc. can be practiced by all. Some people hold the view that only those belonging to the order of sannyasa and members of no other ashrama or order are eligible for the practice of Sankhya Yoga. This too does not appear to be supported by reason. In verse 18 of chapter 2, the Lord commands Arjuna to fight even from the point of view of Sankhya if he recognized sannyasi alone as qualified for the practice of Sankhya Yoga. He could never have commanded Arjuna to fight from the sad point of view, for the order of sannyasa shuts out all action, not to speak of much more terrible deeds like war. Moreover, Arjuna was no sannyasi or recluse either, and the Lord has even advised him to approach men of spiritual insight and seek enlightenment from them. Apart from this, in verse 4 of chapter 3, the Lord declares that perfection in Sankhya Yoga cannot be attained merely by refraining cannot be attained merely by refraining from action. If the Lord regarded sannyasis alone as qualified for the practice of Sankhya Yoga, he would have declared renunciation of action as indispensable for the same rather than make the statements. Only, not only this, in verses 7 to 11 of chapter 13, where he has enumerated various means of attaining wisdom, renunciation of attachment for and identification with son, wife, home, etc. has also been mentioned as one such means. The question of giving up attachment for and identification with one's wife, children, wealth, home, etc. arises only where there is connection with them. In the order of sannyasa, there is no connection with wife, children, and so on. Such being the case, if sannyasis alone were qualified to practice Jnana Yoga, it was needless to mention renunciation of attachment for and identification with them as a means of attaining wisdom, for the question of renouncing them does not arise in the case of a sannyasi. Again in chapter 18, where Arjuna makes a direct inquiry about the nature of sannyasa and tyaga, the Lord discusses in verses 13 to 40 the subject of Sankhya Yoga or the path of knowledge in place of sannyasa, and nowhere mentions the order of sannyasa. The Lord implied the order of sannyasa by the word sannyasa. Or if he regarded sannyasa alone as qualified to practice Sankhya Yoga, he would have certainly mentioned this in clear terms on that occasion. All this definitely proves that the practice of Sankhya Yoga is equally open to the sannyasi as well as to the householder. Of course, it is true that for the practice of Sankhya Yoga, the order of sannyasa affords greater facilities, and in this sense, the mode of life of a recluse may certainly be declared as better suited for the practice of Sankhya Yoga than that of a householder. In the practice of Karma Yoga, action is predominant and one is specially enjoined to perform the duty prescribed for one's grade in society. On the other hand, the renunciation of action has been declared as a hindrance in this path. Therefore, in the order of sannyasa, one cannot practice Karma Yoga, which lays special emphasis on action, for in that order there is actual renunciation both of material objects and action, such as sacrifice and charity, etc. Practice of devotion to God, however, can be carried on in all ashramas. Hence, the practice of Karma Yoga dominated by devotion is possible in all ashramas. There are people who labor under a misconception that the Gita is useful only for hermits and recluses and is of no use to householders. That is why people generally keep their boys aloof from the Gita under the obsession that a study of this book may lead them to renounce their household. But these facts relieve their apprehension. They fail to perceive that it was due to the supremely esoteric teaching of the Gita that Arjuna, who had under a spell of delusion shrunk from his duty as a Kshatriya and made up his mind to live on alms, remained a householder all his life and continued to perform his duties, how could the same Gita produce such a contrary result in the case of our boys? Not only that, the deliverer of the Gita, Bhagavan Shri Krishna himself, as long as he remained on earth as an avatara, the direct manifestation of the deity, remained constantly engaged in action, protected the virtuous, redeemed the wicked by putting an end to their early earthly existence and established the kingdom of righteousness on earth. He even went the length of saying that if he did not scrupulously engage in action, people would follow his ways and give up their duty, and thus he would be responsible for creating confusion in society. This, this does not mean either that the Gita is not meant for recluses. The Gita is intended for men belonging to all varnas and ashramas. All can undertake spiritual practice according to the principle of either Sankhya or Yoga, for whichever they may be qualified, performing actions pertaining to their respective varna or ashrama. Devotion in the Gita, the paths of devotion, knowledge and action. All these have been discussed at length in the Gita. Strivers following any of these paths can obtain sufficient material for their guidance in the books. Whatever personal instructions are given to Arjuna for his own guidance, the Lord generally exhorts him to follow the path of action with special emphasis on devotion. In some places, he has even been asked to action alone. There too, devotion should be inferred as implied, drawing the inference from other places. The Lord directs Arjuna to approach the enlightened and seek enlightenment from them, and that too in order to show him the method of attaining self-realization and by way of chastening him. The Lord did not really mean to direct Arjuna to any enlightened soul to seek wisdom, nor did Arjuna actually seek wisdom anywhere according to the process mentioned in the verse. In reference to the beginning and end of the Gita also leads one to the conclusion that the culmination of the Gita lies in the self-surrender. Through the teachings of the Gita actually commences from the verse Shochan you grieve over those who should not be grieved for, but the seed of this teaching is contained in Arjuna's statement in verse 11.7 Karpanyam dosho pahat स्वभाव etc. in which the word Prapanam having taken the views reveals his spirit of self-surrender. That is why it is with a call to surrender that the Lord concludes his teaching with the words Sarvo Dharman Pritanjali, resigning all duties to me, Shesha. There is not a single chapter in the Gita in which there is no reference to devotion at one place or another. By way of illustration, the reader is referred to verse 61 of chapter 2. Even the Gita fully reveals the truth about devotion and knowledge. So does it unfold the secret of action as well? For depth of space, more reference are not being given here. All this shows that the Gita does not only confine itself to a discussion of devotion alone, but throws simple light on all the three aspects of knowledge, action, and devotion. This is all for today's Gita in English.